Hey guys, it's Natalie here, and today we are talking about mugs. So I'm going to show you guys step by step how to make a mug, the handle, and the whole entire process. So let's get started. There are so many different shapes and sizes of mugs. So no matter what you call them, coffee cups, mugs, teacups, whatever, there are so many different shapes and sizes that you can do. And normally whenever I'm throwing mugs, I do all different shapes, just sort of have fun with it, but I'm going to start to try to do more repetitive forms because I think it'll increase my efficiency and productivity. So I'm just going to show you real quick how to throw a mug. So here I just have a food scale, and I'm going to start just by measuring out about a pound each. And I'm using my recycled clay here, so it's always good to reuse your clay instead of just throwing it away. And since I'm aiming to make all the same sort of size and shape mugs, it's important that I get them all the same weight, because depending on how much clay you have, it's just better for consistency reasons if you're aiming to make all the same size and shape. I mentioned that this is recycled clay, so it is very important to wedge this a lot to make sure you don't have any air bubbles or anything like that, as well as just continue to mix the clay. And I got this nice piece of sheetrock. I actually got several pieces from a family member who's redoing their house, and it is a pretty perfect surface to wedge on and work on because it absorbs moisture. So if you don't have a stretch canvas or other space to wedge your clay and work with it, then this is a pretty good option. So I'm just going to start by wedging this clay, and this clay is also pretty soft right now. So what I'm actually doing whenever I'm wedging is I'm pushing with the palm of this hand and rotating around the palm of this hand. And if you're left-handed, you can do it the opposite way, whatever's more comfortable. So I'm pushing down and forward gradually, and it's sort of creating this rocking motion as it spirals to twist. So I'll show you that. So I'm pressing down and out, and I'm not folding anything over. So down and out, rotating with this hand, and this hand also right here helps bring it back. So we're rocking. See how it folds a little bit, but it's not actually folding, it's just compressing in that spot. Rocking back and forth. So it can be compared to kneading bread, except unlike kneading bread, we're not folding air into this, we're pushing air out of it. So as it develops more of a cone shape, you just saw me twist it, so I start wedging more on the point of the cone. So I just rock. This hand is also pressing slightly on this side just so it doesn't push out, because if I don't have it, it pushes a lot out. So it sort of just helps guide it. And see, now we have this cone here. I'm pushing onto that side. Just keep on doing that. And then I'll show you. We develop this sort of spiral. See that starting to happen? So just do it for a while until the clay is fully mixed. You feel like you've gotten to most of the clay. And see, I just turned it again. Start doing that side. And see, we are pushing down. We are not folding over. If you have any questions on that, you can leave a comment below and I'll get back to you if you have any problems. So this is just one method of wedging, which is the spiral method. I like it, so it's basically wedging with one hand, and it's good for smaller pieces too. But after that, I just develop it into a ball. I used to just leave it in the cone shape because it fits the needs for whenever you start coning on the wheel. But I actually found that for me personally, the ball ends up working better for that. I mentioned that this clay is softer, so it's a little different wedging this one. See how it all just sort of mushes together instead of seeing the actual spiral? But you can see here, it looks sort of like a conch shell, so that's what you want. And after you are about done wedging, you just gradually push this in as you start wedging. You basically just push on the clay a little bit less each time. So now I'm wedging a little bit less, and I'm just gradually rolling it without pushing it out more. So as I push, I'm just pushing into it until it's all rolled together and there's no bubbles incorporated. Also, if you're new to pottery, bubbles are bad in your clay because as the clay is fired, the clay shrinks, but air does not. So air bubbles in your clay pieces will actually cause your piece to explode. Alright, so let's get started. So I wet my bat here just a little bit because it's a wooden bat, so this clay just sticks better if it's wet. So now I'm just going to start by centering my clay. So just throw it down in the center of the wheel, take your hands like this and start forcing the clay to the center. So we're squeezing in with our hands. We are resting our knees, or our elbows on our knees, and just bracing ourselves to force it towards the center. It helps a lot if you throw it down already close to the center. And my wheel's just at full speed right now. So now we're starting to cone up and down. So I'm squeezing in towards the top, forcing the clay upwards into this tall spiral, and then pressing down, mainly with my thumb, because it's a small piece of clay, guiding it downwards. So we're just going up and down. This helps continue to mix the clay, as well as helps center it. Alright, so we're keeping our hands wet. So smoothing out these edges, and my fingers are just straight like this, so they're just guiding upwards to make nice even walls. So now I'm going to start forming my cylinder. So now I am compressing a little more and pulling up. And whenever you do that, as you pull up, you want your fingers to spread out just a tiny bit, because you don't want to compress the top as much as the bottom, because then your walls will get super thin. So it's just gradually less pressure as I pull up. Now I'm just using my hands to straighten this out a little bit, make sure it doesn't bend out like a bowl. I'm just pulling inwards with my fingers. So that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do is add a little bit of shape. Some of it will come from trimming, like down here I'll curve it out a bit. But some of it will come now, so I know I want the top to be a little narrower because I want a nice rounded shape, sort of like a teardrop, but a fat teardrop. Whenever you're throwing a mug, keep in mind that the clay is going to shrink in the kiln, both in the bisque and glaze firing. So you want to throw it bigger than what you actually want it to be. So this is going to be between a 12 and 16 ounce mug, so I'm going to throw it a little bigger than that to account for the shrinkage. And my wheel is fairly slow right now. It's probably about medium speed, but maybe a little slower. It just depends on how much control you feel you have. So I think this is looking pretty good. So I like that, and what I've learned over time is once you like a form, just stop and go with it and stop trying to change it, because whenever you try to change it, that's whenever it ends up flopping, or it's just not as good of a form. So I'm just taking excess moisture off of the wheel and off of the piece. And whenever you stick the sponge inside, you want to be careful not to hit the sides or anything like that. So lastly, I'm going to take a rubber rib and I'm just going to smooth out the edges because I don't want these lines here. So I am going to scrape a little bit of this off because I don't want that extra clay there. Scrape it onto your bucket with water, and now I'm just going to sort of glide it along. If you need a little extra support, use your finger on the inside. A lot of times I'll just do it freehand, lightly. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now what I'm actually gonna do is cut off the top. So this is an optional step. I always do it just to make sure it's nice and even and it'll be level whenever I flip it upside down to trim it. So I just wet my finger here so the clay doesn't stick, and I'm guiding the needle tool with this finger. So holding steady, I'm also using my arms on my legs to brace myself. Holding steady, I'm just going to gradually push in until I hit my finger on the inside. And then, after it goes all the way through, you should be able to pull it up. Oh no. Just like that. I did mention that this clay was a little softer, so I'm just going to be really careful with pulling this up, and then we'll smooth out the rim after. Okay, got that off. Now we're just going to take our fingers, wet both of them, and we're going to smooth out our rim because we don't want it to be flat like that. We want it to have a nice curve for that mouthfeel. That's one of the most important things to think about for a mug. is how it will feel whenever it's in use. And I'm actually gonna use my rib one more time to smooth out the side. Just like that. Smooth out the rim one more time. Finishing touches. Okay, now I'm just gonna look at it from the side. Yeah, I like that form. So I'm gonna take a needle tool, a rib, anything like that, and just scrape the bottom. This will make it easier to cut off the bat later on, because you're making a nice little separation between the bat and the piece. So that looks pretty good. So that is a finished first mug. Pretty nice, and then we'll smooth this out once we, or round it out once we trim this. So now I'll just throw the rest of them. Made, and these are leather hard now, so we can go ahead and trim them. So you can see that there's sort of this really raw bottom to it right now, and there's no really extra form added to the bottom or anything, so that's where I'm going to take trimming on this. So finishing the trimming will help finish out the final form, get that nice curvature at the bottom. So let's get started. Okay, so first what I did was get another piece of clay. This is what's going to hold our piece to the wheel. So what we're going to do first is feel your piece. I have my fingers inside of it, so I'm feeling both walls. So I'm feeling towards the bottom just to see about how thick they are. If it's a form that you've done before, maybe you don't have to do this. I always like to, just to get a feel for how thick the bottom is and how much I need to trim away. So I know that now, and we are just going to start centering. So let me turn the wheel on first. So what I did was basically center it in the middle of the wheel, and then I'm holding my finger at a very stable position while I turn the wheel on slowly. So wherever the piece touches my finger, that's where I know it's too far over. So it's touching right about there. So I'm just going to push it that way a little bit. So I'm going to keep on doing this until it's one even feel. So it keeps hitting right about here, right here. So I'm going to push it towards the opposite way, and you just want to do it a tiny bit as you work it more towards the center. And we are feeling where we're going to be trimming, so not quite up here, but for instance, sometimes pieces can get a little bit off center from the very top of the piece to the bottom, so I'm feeling about here where the trimming is going to stop. Okay, that feels pretty good actually. So now I'm just going to take my little chunk of clay and just take a couple pieces off. We're going to hold down on the top of this to hold it steady while we push these pieces down onto the wheel. You don't want to push it into your piece because one, it can either bend your piece, or you can push it off center, then you have to center it again. That you can probably, you can use smaller pieces than this, but that's just what I grabbed. So just nice little balls of clay. Alright, and this clay is still a little soft too, just like I told you whenever we were trimming. So now what I'm going to do is, this is personal, what I like to do. So I actually start the wheel and I just make a line on the outer rim, and what I'm doing is I'm basically going to cut off this outer corner just in case it's not centered perfectly or something like that. Just going to basically trim it off just as if you were trimming the top of your piece while you're throwing it, just to smooth it out. So now I know for certain that I'm going to be trimming and it's not going to have any sort of wobble. So now what I'm actually going to do is make a line for the bottom, for my foot. So I'm going to make an inner and outer line. So I'm going to trim this part and this part. And then this part is going to be the raised foot that the mug is going to sit on. So after I do that, sometimes I take the small tool, sometimes I take my big trimming tool. I think I'm going to take my big one right now, if I can find it. So this is nice for just removing a lot of clay at once. I actually need to buy more trimming tools because these are getting a little dull. And I mentioned that this is leather hard right now. So if you don't quite know what leather hard is, it's still, you could still work with it, so it's not super dry or anything, but it's not that easy to push in, I guess, make a dimple from or something like that. So and the bottom of the mug is also a little more a little softer than the sides, just because it's thicker, which is just fine as well. So And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm sort of guiding the piece with this hand because just in case, this happens every so often where the piece will fly off the wheel if it's not secured properly, or if the trimming tool catches it in a weird spot. So I'm just holding it center. I'm just letting it glide past my fingers. So I'm just trimming a lot away at once. Because what I'm going to do is end up shaping the form out on the bottom by trimming it. So I'm just going to take one of my smaller trimming tools now and just start taking away clay a little bit faster. These are a little bit sharper than my big one right now. And you can see I'm just following this line, so I'm not trimming past that little line for the outside of the rim. So I'm going to take the big one again, smooth out some of these lines. It's looking pretty good. So I'm actually going to take the rounded part now, and I want a little bit of a curve because I want a little bit of a lift at the very base of the mug, so I'm just going to add that in here. Like that. And then what you can do is take, this is actually really dirty, but you can take a rubber rib and actually smooth it out even more. That gets rid of any lines you have, makes it a nice smooth surface, and that's called burnishing. So you can do this by hand with the back of a spoon or something else. Any sort of wooden tool as well works whenever you're doing it by hand, and I find it's so easy to do with your rubber rib on the wheel. So now I'm going to do the inside, and you can do this in different orders too. You don't have to do the outside all the way and then the inside. You can be working on all of it at one time. That's just how I did it for this specific wheel or mug. Just going to trim down. I want to trim enough away so it's nice and light. I do like, so some people like having a little bit thicker walled mugs, nice and sturdy, but I like having thinner wall because anytime I think about making a vessel, so either a mug, bowl, anything like that, I want it thinner and lighter because it's going to be weighed down by whatever you're putting inside of it. So this is going to have about probably 12 ounces of a liquid, so that's going to add weight. So I'm accounting for that whenever I'm throwing my pieces. So this is the basics of what you can do. Just trim it nice and even. You can do a little bit of a curve if you want. What I'm going to do is actually smooth it out here because I want a nice little curve between the inside and the foot. And I'm going to get one of my smaller tools too. I have these little, they're actually carving tools, but they work really well for trimming because they are very sharp. They do dull down faster than other actual trimming tools, but I do like them a lot, especially for these little details. So, getting that. I used to do a little swirl at the bottom, but I haven't been feeling that lately, so I've just been doing it nice and smooth on the inner rim, which I guess there's still a little bit of swirl, but I used to do an actual one. So I am going to trim this part out a little bit more. Get that nice lift. And use my rubber rib. Smooth it out. And my wheel has been between high and medium high speed this entire time. You can feel however feels, or you can do it however feels best for you and where you're most in control, but I just find that whenever it's a higher speed, it gives you a more even trim depending on how you're doing it. Smoothing it out. So you can see here I like to smooth out all of these edges nicely, because whenever you're setting it on a countertop or a wood table or something, you don't want it to scratch it over time. So I smooth all of these edges out. And one trick, if you're not sure how much further to go, you can give your piece a little push, just to make sure you're not trimming too much. So I'm just barely pushing down, and it's not pushing through. So you want to be careful not to punch a hole in your piece, but if it starts moving a little bit, then you know to stop, because then you're getting really, really thin on the bottom. So this one looks pretty good. I may trim a little bit more on this connection point. Yeah, I like that. I trim a little bit more. Now I'm at full speed on the wheel. See, that's the sort of design I would normally do. I think I am going to smooth it out though. Because I like it nice and smooth these days. Not really sure why, but it does make it easier to add my signature to it whenever it's not completely spiraled on this bottom. Smoothing it out. Okay. Alright, and that looks really good. So I'm just going to take my wooden tool here and sign my initials. You can use a wooden tool, you can use a needle tool, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, now just take off your clay. If any sticks to it, you can always smooth it out later, or once it's completely dry you can sand it, because this clay is a little wet. So yeah, I got some on here, but yeah, I'll just smooth it out and then sand it later. But yeah, so it's a nice even trim. Let me zoom in on this for you. Yep, nice and smooth, just how I like it. So I'm just gonna trim the rest of these now, and I'll just make a little time lapse of it so you don't have to watch every single one at regular speed. So yeah. So handles are really important to think about on mugs, especially because it's the main, I guess one of the main interaction points with the mug. So one, you drink from it, which is really important to get that mouthfeel right, and then also just the way that you hold the mug. So you want to make sure it's comfortable in multiple positions. So this one's really nice for 2 handles, or 2 fingers and 3 fingers. So I'm actually going to make some a little bit smaller, so specifically for 2 fingers on these mugs that I just did. So I'll show you how to pull a handle and then how to shape them after they're dried a little bit. So handles can start different ways. You can either extrude them, roll them out like a coil. What I normally do is pull them with water. So what I'm doing now is just making a nice sort of even, almost cone shape, but just sort of a even block that's sort of cylindrical. And what I'm going to do is take my water here and just start pulling it. So you want to have a little piece here to hold on to, and this stays dry so it doesn't get slippery and slip out of your hand. And I'm just taking my fingers, and you want an even pull from top to bottom, so you don't want to increase pressure as you get to the bottom, because then it can get really thin and just not work well, because it can break off and things like that. So I'm just using a nice even pull, and I'm applying a little bit more pressure each time I pull. So that's how it's getting a little bit thinner. Let me fix this real quick. Okay, then you can see a little better. So I am actually leaving it a little bit thicker down here because I find that it just works better. Otherwise it breaks off really easily. So I will break this part off once I have most of the handle pulled. So that way this piece between here and here is nice and even. I'm going to make it pretty thin. So that can happen. That's exactly what I was talking about. But, so I'm just going to start taking a little more from up here. Handles are not my favorite thing to make. So, it's just because I need to practice with them. But whenever you get a little too much pressure in one spot, it sort of creases it and you can never really get it back to normal. So what I'm going to do is actually going to go ahead and break this off here. So let me show you how I go ahead and do that. So I lay it out just like that on a board and snap it off. So then I make sure that they're the same length and snap it off. I'm going to go ahead and pinch that off, pull a couple more. I think I need 9 is what I counted. See, I just did it again. So just going to take my time a little bit more. I'm doing nice sort of circular handles. But you can do them flatter depending on the shape that you pull it. So if you just squeeze it more, you can do it flatter. Squeeze it more on one side, or 2 sides I guess, rather than all the way around. Just nice and light. This is why it's called pulling a handle, because you're just pulling the clay down. So once I get that much, I'm going to go down here again and pinch it off, just like that. Second one here. So I have 4 now, so I just need 4 more. Plus it might be good to do a couple extras, so if you need 8, maybe you'll do 9. Actually, I think I need 9, so I need 5 more. Do 1 more just in case you mess up or something like that. And if you need these thinner after, you can always roll them out more, or I'm probably going to show you once I attach them. There's a way to attach one side then pull it some more to make it thinner after it's attached, and then attach the second side. So that's a way to get it even thinner and not mess it up as much whenever you're trying to first attach it and pull it and everything. So these other ones are actually getting a little better. See, practice makes better. So I'm gonna keep on working with this clay. And it's really nice if you're doing all the same style handle, because you get them all the same length, put them on the board. And here we're just letting them harden. So whenever you first pull it, it's going to be too soft to really work with without messing up and getting a bunch of imprints in it. So normally you let them harden a little bit. And that way, these are drying at the same time that your mugs are drying before you trim them. So I just threw the mugs and now I'm pulling the handles. So these will be about the same consistency as the mugs after they're thrown. So I have 8, so I need one more. I'll probably make 2 more, as I mentioned, just to be safe. Because, like I said, I don't really prefer pulling mugs. Not my favorite thing to do. But you gotta do it. And I'm just using the same water I threw with, so you don't really need to get clean water if your water is still pretty. I guess I say it's still pretty liquidy, obviously, because it's water, but as you throw, if you're throwing a lot, then your clay will build up and it'll actually turn into slip. So you want it to be more watery and less slippy. And for anyone who doesn't know what slip is, it is just clay and water mixed together. So it's just really a liquidy form of clay. So if you say you use this entire, here, I'm gonna get down here now. Hi. So say you use this entire piece of clay, this piece that broke off earlier, I can still just pull this and make another handle. I guess I'm doing that now. So if any pieces break off, just set them aside and use them. Use them whenever you need more handles or just more clay. See, the form's already started, so I'm just making a few more. Alright, so now you just basically let them hang out here and dry together, and then I will show you how to attach them once they're hardened and the mugs are hardened. Alright, oh my gosh, I look so bright because the sun. So now I'm going to show you guys how to attach these handles that we pulled. I pulled them yesterday. I pulled them just a few minutes ago for you. I'm going to show you guys how to attach these to the mugs. So I'll just zoom in on that just like I have been for everything else so you can see close up how it's done. Alright, so first what we're going to think about is where we want the handle to be placed. So I'm going to do it more here, I think. You can also do it all the way around. So I'm probably just going to play with it and see what I like. But first, I guess after you determine where you want the top of the handle to be, I'm thinking about there-ish. We're just going to start patting this. These handles actually dried out a little bit more than I wanted, but that's okay. I can still work with it. So what I'm doing here is just patting out this end, which is what is going to attach here. So by patting this out, I'm creating these little parts that come out and will just help us smooth out the connection point between the handle and the mug. So I'm just doing that with my finger, holding steady with these 2 fingers where the top is going to be, so it's pretty even across. Just gonna smooth it out a little bit while pinching a little bit like that. And these, you just have to work with them. So there's so many ways to make handles. I think I already mentioned you can extrude them, pull them, make a slab and cut them. You can also throw a ring on the wheel and cut those off. So there's a lot of ways. I'm just slowly smoothing this out. This would be a little bit faster if the clay wasn't so hard, but I'm just keeping the rest of them sprayed like that. just since it's summertime and I'm outside in Texas, so this would probably not be much of a problem if you're inside. So I'm just patting this out and I'm just gonna look at it. Alright, my camera battery died, so I just switched over to my phone while that recharges. So this is looking pretty good. I've just been flattening this out some more. You can see it's pretty basic. You just want this little bit of an edge here, and you don't have to do it this way. I have not done it this way in a while, but I'm doing it again recently just because it just seems a lot easier. So I am going to spray my mug again because you want to make sure it's about the same consistency as your handles. You want these to dry the same, so you want them to have the same sort of moisture level at the time that you attach them. So you can see here I'm lining it up about where I want it, maybe a little higher. Maybe this way. No, let's stick with this way. Okay, so I'm just gonna even this out, and now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna spray the connection. If you have slip, use that. I don't have any handy right now, so this will work just fine. I'm just scoring right where my handle is gonna connect, so I want it a little bit bigger, and by spraying it, it helps make a sort of slip. So it should work just fine. Score it like that. If you don't have a serrated rib, they have other scoring tools. Let me see if yeah, they have these. You can also use a needle tool. They have these small ones, or you can just use a needle tool or a knife or whatever. So I'm gonna score that. I'm also gonna score this side. Spray that as well. Score some more. I'm just slipping this up a little bit, just a makeshift slip. So now I want to put this on, and I want to make sure it's on straight and level. So I'm just squeezing this on like that, and then I'm gonna smooth it out a little bit, but before I do it too much, I'm just gonna look at it some, make sure it's nice and level. Alright, so now I'm just going to start smoothing it out, pushing it a little more, smoothing. You can use tools for this or your fingers. I may go back and smooth some with a tool depending on if there's a little crease that I can't get in with my fingers. But this is why we made that little part that, I don't even know what to call it, just the part that sort of we bent out a little bit, just so we have some material to work with. Otherwise you could always get some really thick slip and smooth it in there, or even just a small coil to smooth around the handle. So I'm actually going to spray this and then use that water to sort of smooth it out with my finger. So now that is pretty well connected. Just gonna smooth it out a little bit, get rid of some of the marks, and I am most likely gonna go back and sand all of these a little bit once they are bone dry. It just helps get rid of, see, we have some little dots of clay around different places, even on the bottom a little bit, so it'll just help smooth everything out for the final disc firing. Alright, so now I'm going to let that sit while I work on another one, and then eventually we are going to pull this a little more and then attach it to the bottom. This one I might end up going down here, maybe. I don't know, we'll see. I am gonna make sure it stays nice and moist though. And you can, if you're doing like a lot of these at one time, you can cover them with some plastic. while you're waiting and things like that. I'm in the shade right now, so it's fine for now. So I want them to sort of harden a little bit on this connection point so we don't accidentally pull it off. So what we're gonna do, we're basically gonna pull this handle more. So I am gonna move this one out of the way a little bit. So just how we pulled the other handles, let me go ahead and smooth this real quick. Because it is skinnier here than it is here right now, so I'm just smoothing that transition out a tiny, tiny bit. And then you can get a bucket of water like we pulled handles. I'm just using the spray bottle because I don't have a bucket of water right now. Just smoothing it out, pulling slightly. I mentioned that this is still a little hard, so I'm just pulling really lightly. And remember, you're pulling evenly. And if this connection feels really wobbly at all, just let it sit a little longer while keeping this part still pretty damp so that it's workable. But you can let this part harden a little more so you don't feel like you're gonna pull it off. So I'm just smoothing it out, making sure, just turning it to make sure it's even on all the sides. This may be easier too with a bucket of water. And if you pull your handles skinny enough and long enough to start out with, you don't have to do this. You can just go ahead and bend it around and attach it. So I just pulled this one a little thicker and shorter. So this is what I'm doing with it. So you can see it's gradually getting longer. That'd be interesting, right? A little open handle mug. Kind of like that idea. So maybe this one I'll do a nice one finger mug. I don't know, you can let me know what you guys think. Obviously this is going to be finished before you guys get a chance to comment, but let me know, do you like the idea of an open handle mug? Should I make some of those? I mean, it would still be held the same way and then you could set it on something like that. Let me know what you think. So now, this is just gonna be a nice one finger mug, or handle. So, what I'm gonna do is look, I've already sort of attached it, but it's definitely not close to where it needs to be. So I'm just looking from this direction all around and making sure it's nice and smooth and even. You don't want to put on a crooked handle. I mean, if you do, you can try to fix it a little bit and it doesn't have to matter too much, but it does a little. So now what I'm actually going to do, so this looks good, I'm going to just lift this slightly and score it a little bit. Okay, spray a little water, and this can be scored just a little bit. We've been working with water on this handle, so it's already pretty able to be manipulated into the right little point, and then just make sure again it's nice, even, and just start compressing it down. This one we obviously did not have the same attachment point that we pinched out, so I'm just using tools to help smooth it out a little bit. I just cut a tiny little piece off because it wasn't, the bottom of the handle was not perfectly straight. It was a little bit like sideways, so I just cut off the little corner of the mug, and I'm just going to start smoothing it. Also, so this is a nice one-handle mug. If you decide you want this to fit a couple more fingers, go ahead, and you've already attached the second part. You can just finish attaching the second part and just take water and smooth it out more and begin to expand it. It's the same as just almost pulling a handle, but both sides are attached. So you're just thinning it out and making it a bit bigger. So I have done that before if I had changed my mind on something. So now on this interior part, you can see it's that little crevice, so I'm just gonna use my tool, and basically what I'm doing is slightly scraping the clay on the handle and pushing it into that crevice. And then over here, I'm doing the same thing and then smoothing it out. And like I said, I am gonna sand these, but you can also take water and continue to smooth them out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Just gonna make sure it's still straight. I squished it a little there, so straight. And I'm also gonna shape it a little more because I want this to be a little bit more geometric on the handle. So it's still pretty round, so I'm just trying to make this kind of flat and that kind of flat. So I'm just pinching different areas. Okay, now I'm going to take my water again and just start smoothing out a little more. All the smoothing that you can do at this point will help you in the long run. Also remember to spray your handles if they're going to dry out. Keep everything nice and soft and damp. Alright, that is looking pretty good. And I got a couple fingerprints and things over here, and that's fine. Again, just sand it off or smooth it out at this point if you can. Alright, I think that looks pretty darn good. So yeah, so it is a little bit big right now. You can see my finger goes pretty far. But keep in mind that this is going to shrink in the kiln. So you want it to be, especially if it's just for one finger or something, you want to make sure that that one finger does fit really well. So this will be a really nice handle. Sorry, I can't really hold it for you to see. So yeah, that's going to shrink a little bit, so then it'll be about the perfect size. Alright, so now I'm just going to set this aside and cover it in plastic. We want to dry these slow to make sure we don't get any cracks on or between the handle and the mug body. Believe me, I've done that before. I used to just never, once I was done with something, I would just set it aside. I would normally set it upside down since the base is normally thicker to help dry, but everything just cracks. If it's connected at some point, if it's not perfectly aligned in terms of their moisture content. So just dry it slowly, take your time, no rush. So yeah, I'm just going to continue on these next ones. This video. I really hope that you learned something about making a mug, pulling handles, trimming, anything like that. Be sure to like this video and subscribe. I'm going to have a lot of pottery videos coming soon, as well as some plant videos, so stay tuned for that. And let me know what you learned or what you do differently. I always appreciate any other tips or tricks that people have to share. So thank you guys so much. See you later.